So in this video, I wanted to quickly talk through a really interesting pen from Pilot called the 78G Plus. And this is an entry-level fountain pen that is sold in the Chinese market. It's still made by Pilot, it's made in Japan, but it's really for sale in China. So if you're in Europe or the US and you want to get it, then you have to go ahead and import it. It's not hard to find on eBay and Rakuten and other places where you might buy pens from, might import pens from, but it's not something you're going to go down to a local stationery store and see. So the 78G is 78G Plus rather is the successor to the 78G, which was never super popular in the US. I know some people did import them, but it's basically just an entry-level fountain pen from Pilot that is, I would say, more of a classic design than the Metropolitan or the newer Explorer. The 78G had been for sale since, 2013, 2012, something like that. Not a super long time, but for a while. And then in 2018, it was replaced by the 78G Plus. And we'll get into those differences in a little bit, but let's get into the pen first. So this is it. It's I would say a medium-sized, bordering on small-sized pen, fully plastic body, metal clip in gold, which is nice. Some gold banding here and here. This band is just part of the clip. This is printed. That's not actually metal. Looks really sharp, but it's just printed on there. You see that classic Japanese sticker here showing the size of the nib. This comes off, but a lot of people tend to leave them on because it looks cool. And then very simple top and bottom, almost like a platinum preppy, but obviously it's a Pilot. Unlike most of Pilot's entry-level fountain pens, this one actually has a screw cap as opposed to a snap-on cap. So that's a really nice difference. A lot of people prefer screw caps. They just give the pen kind of a more higher end feel. Also, it helps prevent drying from the nib a bit. So this one has that screw cap, whereas the Metropolitan, Explorer, and others are all snap-on. Very simple body. You can see it has a very classic cigar type shape, and just the whole profile of it looks like a much older pen than something released in 2018. And obviously Pilot really deviated from this and from the classic design when they came out with the Explorer, which is much larger. It has a really wide body. It has a really vibrant colors. It's a whole lot different. The 78G and the 78G Plus have the same nib. And in addition to having the same nib as each other, they have the same nib as the Pilot Pereira, that's the PRERA, and the Pilot Metropolitan, and some of those other entry-level Pilots. They all use the same steel nib, and it's fine. I know it's not really one I love, but I keep buying pens that use it regardless. The difference with the 78G and the 78G Plus is it comes in this gold plating, and I think it's just like gold electroplated, like the bottom of the line, like what you could do to make it gold colored. I'm not sure if it's even actually gold. And there's a lot of writing on here, which is pretty cool, and you could probably just make it out. It says Pilot Super Quality Japan, and then the size. In this case, there's F. The nib, again, it's fully interchangeable, the nib and the feed, to the Metropolitan, the Pereira, and some of those other pens from Pilot. One of the big differences between the 78G and the 78G Plus is that the G Plus is sold in an extra fine nib, whereas the 78G was only sold in a fine and a medium. So that's a pretty interesting change if you use extra fine nibs. Opening the pen up, we could see no metal hardware here, no banding here, no metal on the screwing, on the part inside, nothing like that. This piece isn't metal, nothing like that. It does include a Pilot converter, which is very cool. The converter sells on its own. This is like the Con 50, and this sells for, I think it's the Con 40. I always mix those two up. But these things sell for maybe $6, $7 each, and this is included with the pen, whereas most of Pilot's entry-level fountain pens will not include a converter. So that's a really nice setup, given that this is probably, call it on eBay now, it's probably like a $15 or maybe $18 pen. To get a $6 converter with it, obviously, is pretty cool. So standard screw type converter, no different than the one sold at retail, and it's included. You could use cartridges with this. You could use the different Pilot converters, the Con 50, the Con 40, the squeeze ones. It will not accommodate a Con 70, so that's too bad. The previous model, the 78G, included the Con B, the squeeze type converter, not this one, which is, again, I'm blanking on the name, whether it's the Con 40 or Con 50. I always flip those two. And then let's get into the box, because the box, it's not a box you'll keep, but it is definitely nice they included it. So here it is. This is the box. Again, it's not something you're going to like put on your bookshelf and keep forever, but it's nicer than it needs to be. You can see there's some cool design on the side. Pilot, that's the model. Actually, sorry, the model is right here. This is the FP-78G, so you can see there. And then it's the G Plus specifically. Includes some instruction manual. You can see it is sold by pilotpen.com.cn, so Pilot Pen China, not Pilot Pen Japan. This model is, I guess it was made in 2018 in June, and then not too much else to see in the box. Again, this is, I don't know, I think that looks really cool, quite nice. And then inside, I don't think there's anything inside. I don't think, nope, nothing there. So really, really simple setup, and you're not gonna need that. So just to rewind a little bit, if you're trying to figure out the differences between the 78G and the 78G Plus, again, the differences, I have them all on unsharpened.com, but it's worth checking them out, or worth explaining them here. The first is the nib. The G Plus, 78G Plus, is sold in an extra fine. Previously it was not. The second is the converter. The converter is included, this screw type converter, the Con 50, is included with this model. Previously you had an aerometric, kind of a rubber bulb squeeze ones that aren't that good. The same one that would have been included with a Metropolitan. The same way the Metropolitan basically shifted from one converter type to the new one a couple years ago, this did the same. And then the 78G Plus comes in some different colors. It comes in a new blue, and it comes in a clear demonstrator that was not previously available. So pretty good changes, but again, nothing earth-shattering. And if you have a 78, there's no need to go up to a 78G. Sorry, if you have a 78G, there's no need to move to a 78G Plus unless you really need an extra fine. So the size is almost spot on with a Sharpie. So if you're trying to figure it out, the Sharpie has some extra width, but lengthwise, it's essentially the same. And there you go. Sharpie's actually, from a writing standpoint, it's actually larger. It is a fairly small pen, and it's quite light. So if you love the metal hardware of a Metropolitan, the 78G Plus is not the right pen for you. But if you want something a little bit smaller, then it's a pretty good fit. If you want something larger, then go ahead and get the Explorer, because they're all about the same price. And then the Explorer is much larger, and it can use the Con 70, the big converter. So I don't think a lot has to be said about the nib, because so many times we've talked about the Explorer and the Metropolitan and all those pens. The Pereira, they all use that same stainless steel nib. So there's not a huge amount to say to it. Here it's just the same thing, but gold plated. That said, I will go on for a little bit. For the people who aren't super familiar with this nib, it is very stiff, very little flex, or not flex, like very little movement or line variation, no flex, obviously. It's just a stiff steel nib. You know, it will bring out a little bit of expression, but this is really a note-taking nib that's meant to last really well throughout time and just be super reliable day to day. I don't take any enjoyment out of using this nib, but it never like fails me. It's always ready to go when you need it. Very reliable. Pilot's quite good at that, but it's not like a fun nib to use or anything like that. In the fine, which is what I bought it in, I find it to run a little dry. It's fine. You know, for a Japanese fine, it's completely what you would expect. I tend to prefer the medium just because the nib gets a little bit smoother as you put more ink down. I'm not using the stock ink that it came with, which obviously if you use a converter, there's no way to fill it with the without some fountain pen ink. This is a Noodler's Blue Black, which is I've been really enjoying, and that's a really nice writing fountain pen ink that will make this, it'll kind of bring out the most in a pen like this because it is a little on the dry side, and just being a lefty with a fine nib is always a little bit of a challenge. So this is the Pilot 780G Plus in fine. I do find that name to be extremely challenging to say over and over again. It's the Pilot 78G Plus. I keep on saying the 780G Plus, but there you have it. Nice writer, no problems with it, but a little bit dull, I would say. So if you're looking for an interesting entry-level Pilot fountain pen and you're okay with waiting a couple weeks for it to get to your house, at least if you live in the US or Europe or Australia or something like that, then the 78G Plus is a pretty interesting option. There's no reason to track down a 78G. This is the same pen, so go ahead and buy the 78G Plus. Is it worth an extra few dollars or a couple extra weeks waiting over a Metropolitan or an Explorer? I would say no. Out of the three, or I guess you could throw the Pereira in there, but that's a little bit more expensive. Out of those four, I tend to prefer, I used to prefer the Metropolitan, but at this point, I'm a full-on convert to the Explorer. It's too light, but I like the larger size, and I like that I could use the Con 70. So out of those four, I would say get the Explorer, but the 78G is definitely a very nice looking classical fountain pen that works really well. It'll work a lot better than if you had gotten the equivalent old pen and used that. The older pens will be less reliable, even if they look the same as this, but they will be more fun to write with. Those the older nibs tend to be a little bit nicer than these newer nibs. Again, the nib is like completely adequate. It does the job. I just don't find it to be very fun to use. So that is the Pilot 78G Plus. Thanks for watching.